Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Human Spirit Podcast. I'm here today with the lovely Jackie. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing everything about archetypes, leadership, and other concepts within, psychology, but also NLP and Jackie's vast knowledge around coaching. So did you want to maybe introduce yourself and give everyone a bit of a rundown about what you do and, yeah.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to do this podcast with you today. And you've just listed a whole vast of topics here that we can discuss, and I'm really looking forward to it. Yes, I am a leadership coach. I do have different methods that I coach in, NLP, archetypes, and also deeper human qualities as our being and how that can be transformed. And that's not how I started. So I've been doing this for the last 6-7 years. I started in science. I studied physics. I wanted to understand the dark matter, and I'm still interested in it. And somehow the dark matter continues into the psyche. And the psyche is kind of dark as well. So people often ask me, how come you studied physics and then you're doing this? Where's the connection? And I still love physics. And then after I finished my studies and I did my master's, I was thinking, am I going to stay in science or am I going to leave? And I decided to leave. I wanted to explore the business world. I really enjoyed that. I had almost 2 decades of a career in the business world. I didn't leave the business world because I didn't like it anymore. I just realized my sweet spot is with people, understanding people, getting the best out of people. And that's where coaching comes in. And that's why I'm also still very passionate about coaching in business, because there's a lot of stress in business. There's a lot of pressures on leaders, and I like to help them with that so they can become empowered, more effective, and free to be themselves and actually have a prosperous career and not suffer so much from the stresses and anxieties.
It's a lot.
That's a lot. I've been around for a while.
There are a bunch of different ways we could take this. So I guess curious to what is your mission that you're on? Do you have a mission statement or a vision that you're kind of directing your energy or time to? And what are you visualizing?
Well, that's a really, really good point. I was always also already from a young age connected to a purpose, that I had a sense, I do have a purpose in life, and it was somewhat around acquiring wisdom and passing it on. And that's also why I studied physics. That was an area where I thought I can acquire wisdom and understanding the universe and passing it on. And today it's more focused on developing leaders so they can be their authentic self, they are effective and empowered in being a leader and connected to their deeper purpose and meaning. So that's my mission. Yeah.
And so who do you think, in leadership, do you think there are people that are born to be leaders, or through your work you believe that anyone can become a leader, and that's the kind of path you're trying to, is that...
That is a question I also get asked a lot, and it does make sense, because if you kind of look into other avenues, let's say arts, someone is a great pianist or a singer, and you say, well, they would have to have some talent or aptitude to do that. And I think there are people who are born leaders. They have this charisma. They love leading. They love leading the way and working it out for themselves and then others to follow. But I also strongly believe leadership can be learned. It's a maturity in people. It's taking responsibility. And you don't have to have a great team, as in a big or a large team. Often people think, oh my God, leaders are the ones that are stand on stage, they're famous, they have huge teams. That's not what's required. You can be a leader in a family. You can be a leader in your own life. So for me, it's really also invoking the leader in everyone, because everyone can be that.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think there's something very noble as well about just being a leader for yourself and for others. Like, you know, not for the fame or the fortune, but just because it's the right thing for you to do. And you being the best version of yourself is going to, you know, spark others to be the best version of themselves. And that's enough. I think that's what a leader does.
Yeah.
And there's a very interesting quote that I actually heard, I think it was 2 days ago. So very fitting for this. And no, it was last night. It was last night. I was watching June 1. And it was, the line said, people don't, like, a leader doesn't seek to be a leader. They're called to be leaders.
Oh,
and
beautiful.
That hit me.
It's just wow! That really gets me too. I'm getting goosebumps. Yeah,
it's something you're called to do. You know?
Yeah,
because you can struggle with that. Sometimes you seek for opportunities to be a leader, but then you're kind of more of a tyrant. You're kind of more of a tyrannical sort of character. You're trying to impose your way on others, and so it's an interesting play. Like, I think that just the dynamics of psychology in general is a very interesting thing, because you see how you're acting and stuff. So. Maybe we could talk more about archetypes, because I know that that's something you're very passionate about. You read a book about it. So maybe we can discuss, I guess, maybe the general concept of archetypes, what they are.
Yeah.
And then maybe go into the 12 different archetypes that you use as well.
Yeah, awesome, the topic of archetypes came to me when I sort of got my calling being a leader, as in more focusing on coaching or mentoring. I wasn't quite sure what that looked like at the start. So I was just finishing up my career in the corporate world. And I had this calling, calling to kind of complete that phase of my life and move into more a coaching type of role. I had no idea, as I said, what that would look like. And that's when I came across archetypes. I came through it through Carolyn Mays. She was in Sydney at the time. She did a workshop, a one-day workshop, and I was asked by a friend to attend. And I went straight away. I bought her book. I bought many of her books, and one of them was on archetypes. And it just really resonated with me on a deep level. So using her method and her book, I was able to identify my core archetypes. And when I had this sort of all laid out in front of me at home, being by myself, being in this major transition period, I really started to break out in tears, because what I could see is that there were some archetypes that were really deeply connected to me, close to my heart, that I've neglected through my life in the corporate.
Could you explain your definition of an archetype so people may understand?
Well, that's a good point. So an archetype is kind of an imprint of deeper behavior. It's like an archetype itself is a personality, and it relates to you on a soul level, and it reveals a deeper motivation. And we use archetypes all the time, often, without being typically too aware of it, as in someone would say, oh, she behaves like a princess, or someone else would say, oh, this is such a pioneer. And these are all archetypes. They convey a complex pattern of behavior. They connect to deeper motivation within people. They are connected to us on a soul level. They're not just a personality preference. And they have a story. And this story is something that we as a human society and human evolution, we have kind of put these stories there. And as people, we just love stories. Podcasting is storytelling, isn't it? It's my story, your story. And people love to connect to people through their story. And this is what archetypes are about.
Yeah, that resonates very deeply with me as well.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know. You have a very good grasp on
archetypes. Eyes lit up. I was like, yes, I love archetypes. So continue on. So you got into archetypes through Louise.
Through Carolyn Mays.
Carolyn Mays.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Louise Hayes for some reason.
Oh,
Carolyn Mays, sorry.
I'm sure Louise Hayes
is also
probably also in this arena. And I've never heard about archetypes, and yes, because this is part of us. It's part of our storytelling. It's part of our own unique story. So we do connect to it deeply. And then I was so fascinated by it. I thought, this is going to be my first stepping stone into coaching. I'm going to learn about archetype. I'm going to certify in it. And then I developed my own courses, and I started coaching on it, using it on it, and then building on it, and also using other coaching modalities as well. But I always come back to archetypes. And then I was called to write a book. I do not consider myself to be like a writer, and I was resisting it. And then I had these synchronicities happening to me, where I was guided to go down the road to this bookshop, and I was like talking to the universe, why should I go there? Why should I walk down the street to the bookshop? I went to the bookshop. There was a book in the window. The name of the author was almost my name, Jacqueline. My name is Jacqueline Hofste. Her name was probably Jacqueline or Hoffman or something, very similar. No. And then it was a book for children, and it had little stories and little characters. I didn't know at the time what my book would look like or what it would be about. Later, when I published my book, I thought, oh my God, even my archetypes, the characters, matched that book that I saw in the bookshop. Yeah, so when I saw that book, I thought, okay, I'm writing. I'm going to do it. So I wrote the book it's an introduction about archetypes, what they are for the person who has no understanding, like I didn't have at some point, and how they can identify the core archetypes that are the theme of their life. So there are hundreds or even thousands of archetypes.
Probably infinite.
Infinite, and also new ones that we, as a human collective, put in there. Evolve, that's right. But there is a theme that's connected, deeply connected to a person. And that theme, so to speak, is consistent of several archetypes. And following that system, we're talking about 12 archetypes. 12 seems to be a complete number. And it's not that science where it only has to be like this or like this. No, it's like intuitively. Yeah. There are 12, anything beyond 12 is going to become very difficult to manage. Yeah, so there are 12. And these archetypes, when people identify them, and I love it when we do this in the workshop and people identify with certain archetypes and they think, oh my God, I'm the artist. Oh my God, I'm the entrepreneur. The smile on their face. It's almost like a relief. I also remember someone, we couldn't kind of get the final archetype. And then it came down to the witch. As oh my God, you should have seen the smile and the relief. Oh, yes, I am a witch. You should come to my house and see what it looks like. There are crystals and feathers and all of these things. So archetypes are a deep expression of people's lives. And I love it. I mean, I haven't had a client yet who was not mesmerized by their own archetypes. So they stick with us for life, but they mature as a person. So archetypes guide you along your own empowerment. So, there are challenges that the archetypes are experiencing as we experience challenges as we go through life. And they have the shadow and the light side. So, for example, the queen archetype, most people would, really know what a queen is about. But deeply, the queen's motivation is being there for her people, nurturing her people. And but when the queen is under stress or under betrayal or needs to defend herself, she becomes very controlling, which is the shadow side. So and life will present us with these challenges where the shadow comes out, and then we start to learn about the shadow. And then we start to learn, well, I don't have to be controlling. I can be different around that. And that's sort of how we learn to become more and more empowered and embody this archetype. And becoming empowered, I know empowerment is kind of a buzzword these days. Everyone, I want to be empowered, and it's cool to be empowered. And it is, it's amazing, but it needs to be claimed. And being empowered is a process, becoming more and more empowered because you are mastering your challenges, and that's totally empowering. I remember one of my clients, she we were looking into the prostitute archetype, which is an archetype. There are 4 archetypes that we all have. The child, the victim, the prostitute, and the saboteur archetype. So we all have them. We all can relate to them, although the victim is not very much liked. People say, I don't have a victim archetype. But I can talk about that too. These 4 archetypes, we all embody them to some degree, and they usually show up at a very early age in life. They're sort of more triggering, maybe more predominantly triggering survival instincts, but all the others can do that too. So we were with her looking at the prostitute archetype, and she was in this process of that she wanted to work a little bit less. She was a trader, and she could easily work less. Her income was really good. And then so she could look into other areas in life and maybe give back to communities. She wanted to work with young women. So she had this experience with one of her clients who was quite a sort of very controlling and dominating client, and she was fully booked out. He called her last minute and she said, can you do this for me in the next 2 weeks? And she said, I'm sorry, I can't because I'm fully booked. This was the first time that she actually declined this. She went, and then he, which was really funny, comical in a way, he asked her, okay, I get it. What if I pay you more money? Which is appealing to the prostitute again. And she said, and she said, no, I can't. I'm fully booked. And when she came back to our next session, which was a workshop, and she came in 50 minutes earlier to tell me this, she was bouncing out of her skin because for the first time in her life, in this kind of scenario, she was able to set her healthy boundaries and say no, which was a huge thing for her. This is empowerment.
She not necessarily broke the archetype, but she became aware of it. So now she has more freedom of choice.
Exactly. Yeah, that's very,
because
very
if you don't understand the archetype, it kind of controls you without you noticing it.
Yeah. That's right. It has a real grip on you. Yeah. And when I see that in people, oh God, it makes my heart sing. I was so happy.
That's amazing.
So happy. Yeah. And that thing, it may look as, it's not such a big thing, but it is, because she needed to have, or she wanted to have, a couple of days free in her life so she could work with communities and young women. And that not being able to set these boundaries or being controlled by this prostitute archetype was in the way of that. So she had kind of removed that obstacle, empowered herself, because the next time she may have to say no to someone, it will be easier for her to do so.
And so when you say, did you shift her archetype from one to another? And was that the process that you went through with coaching?
Well, we don't kind of change archetypes. And sometimes I also get asked by people, well, how can I transition from the princess to the queen, for example? I just said that recently. I thought that was really cute.
Marry the king.
Yeah, marry king. I said, and I said to her, archetypally, you will always have the princess archetype. But the princess also matures. There is a lot to be said about the princess archetype, because the princess archetype is sort of embodying higher standards, and she will never drop her standard. She will ask everyone else to up their standard, which is a very positive thing around the princess archetype. And the way this archetype matures and embodies in a person becomes more and more mature. We often look at the princess or the, princess on the pea, and it's very, delicate, and they are also. But I sometimes look too much at the shadow. So that archetype will always stay with the person. That will, in real life, the princess may become the queen, but not as an archetypal transition. But having said this, we can tap into any archetype because it's in us already. The queen would be in her as well, just not as a dominant pattern. And she can step into the queen archetype at certain times, embody that, and be that in life.
Yeah, so to further that point, because the way I see it is like through the human evolution, we've had different characters play out in time. So many different people, obviously, millions, billions of people, and so everyone has their own unique persona.
Yeah.
And so within your own DNA, within your own coding, within your own biology, exist all the different ways that you could be. And so you're tapping into, and archetypes are more like, let's say, a neural pathway, a certain pattern that people tend to use over time to become a stronger sort of pattern.
Yeah.
And so you can then tap into that, and that's when they all exist. I think, even archangels. So the reason we pray to a certain, because each archangel is meant to be a different archetype.
An archetype,
an archetype, and then devils or demons are also archetypes. The shadow aspect. And so when people pray, what they're essentially trying to do, whether they're aware or not, is they're trying to open up the portal to allow that archetype to embody them and come through them, because you're trying to change your actions or trying to change your behavior.
Yeah.
So you're trying to call upon a certain angel or call upon a certain archetype. So there's a very similar, I guess, parallel between archetypes and angels and characters, gods, all those sort of things. They're all archetypal.
They are all archetypes. Yeah, absolutely correct. Archetypes, it's kind of like a template or in a certain sort of a recipe for something. Love is an archetype as a process or a way of being. Love is archetypal. If it doesn't matter which country a person comes from. If I talk about love, everyone would have a very similar concept of love.
They're like themes.
Yeah, they're like themes, and they're archetypal themes, archetypal to our human collective. And so are archangels and gods and demons. They are also archetypes. Yeah.
So what are the 12 archetypes that you use in your work?
I use hundreds of archetypes.
Yeah, the 12 main ones.
Yeah, the 12 main ones for a person. So they are individual. So they can be pulled out from all the archetypes that exist. But to keep it relatively manageable, I in my book, I'll probably have around 80 very common type of archetypes. So within the 12 archetypes, there are, as I said, there are 4 archetypes that we all have: the child archetype, the victim, the saboteur, and the prostitute. These 4 archetypes a person doesn't have to identify anymore. They're already in your psyche. You just want to understand how they play out in your life. Mm-hmm. That means there are 8 archetypes left to fill the picture of 12. And the 8 archetypes, they can be, the person has to identify themselves. I go through a guided process where I help people how to look at archetypes, how to identify, how can you identify that this is your archetype. Sometimes people call you certain names, like a person may be called Madonna, there's a hint there. Or, a person may be called, oh, you're such a princess. And that is often a hint that there is an archetype there. And in most cases, it's that archetype. And sometimes, like within the 80 or something archetypes that I have, sometimes, like as I said earlier, with the witch archetype, it wasn't part of my set. But then I come in and I sense, okay, I think this sounds like a witch. So it's just, this is where my expertise comes into, to look a little bit further than the set that I have, to make sure we get the right ones. Sometimes a person might identify with the goddess archetype. So I have the goddess archetype in my set, but there are so many different types of goddesses. So then I actually send them off, or send them more information what type of a goddess archetype they specifically connect to. And we kind of go through this process. And it's absolutely stunning, and it's interesting. I mean, there's, the alchemist, the seeker, the guide, the entrepreneur, the engineer, the pioneer, the magician. And, I do also describe the vampire archetype. And I do describe the vampire archetype because it's such a primal archetype and we experience it a lot. But I haven't actually met a person who had the vampire archetype as their core. They probably wouldn't come to me. So I've had a count.
Out of curiosity, what's the vampire?
The vampire archetype can be a little bit compared to the narcissist, but the vampire embodies a lot more. So the vampire embodies a lot of universal wisdom. They know how the world ticks, and they know how you tick. But they do have this internal belief that they need to use resources from other people because they can't produce it themselves. So this is where the vampiristic sort of energy sucking, in the sort of literature, blood sucking sort of vampire comes from, where they draw upon your resources because they think in the shadow, they think they don't have it themselves, and they are very, self-centered also. They're very charismatic. They can draw you in. I've had a lot of people who, including myself, who had experienced someone who has that characteristic. That doesn't mean that they have a vampire archetype as such. But I did have a counselor as part of my workshops, and she said that she sometimes gets them in as someone who's seeking help. They have this vampiristic type of characteristic. But I also put the vampire in there as in a little bit of sort of an archetype that just needs to be explained, that people find absolutely fascinating. So I'll put it in there, and I do, often once a year when we have Halloween, I dig them out. I do a bit of a fun thing around the Halloween, and I had Halloween webinars where we talk about the vampire, the magician, and these archetypes. I had a few magicians, but not a vampire. I think that would be probably unheard of, that they would come and consult me. And
And so how are you using these archetypes, I guess, for business or leadership?
Right.
Yeah. Are you drawing upon this for the same sort of work? Yeah.
The good thing about archetypes is if I know the person that is in my team, let's say someone has, as we know we have many archetypes, but there is a dominance, let's say, an artistic archetype. And then there is someone who has the engineers coming out a lot, or the entrepreneur or the ruler type of archetype. If I know that about a person, that's really all, to keep it simple, all I need to know, and I get a deeper understanding of what this person is about. So it makes it easy in a work environment to understand other people to start with. And then I use a different method in business. So I look at the 9 leadership archetypes using an Enneagram type of method. And that's probably too much to go into that type of symbol, but the Enneagram consists of 9 archetypes. So I said 12, 9 leadership archetypes. And that's probably a lot. So there's the perfectionist, and then there's the sort of artistic type of archetype, the ruler. And people get to identify their dominance, and usually it's two. It's not such a science that you only have this one connection to this one archetype. We can relate to all of them. We have a bit of all of them in us, but there will be a dominance. They're very simple also assessment tests. You can do like 5 minutes free tests to identify which one is yours. And I often will, like in my workshops, I let them identify a couple for themselves. And usually people know. And if you don't know, I bet the others know. They say, oh, I had people pointing out, you're such an athlete, or you're such a queen, So people know this about others. It helps people to understand more. Also, as a team leader, it helps you to understand more what's the deeper motivation for someone who is an engineer, for someone who is an artist, for someone who is a perfectionist and an artist, or you have an easier access to understanding what is their deeper motivation.
Yeah, that's because each archetype has a deeper motivation.
That's right.
That's driving the archetype.
That's driving it, and you can work with that. And I also, within that context, I do describe sort of dominant behavior patterns. I do describe actions they like to take, and also thinking patterns, which is quite interesting. People often say, oh, yeah, I think that a lot. It's all these different patterns, and it's very fascinating for people. People love looking at it this way. It's easy to relate to, easy to memorize, and so this is how I use it in business. And
I think this sort of knowledge is of empirical importance. I think because it gives you an idea, like I mentioned a lot of times in the podcast, it gives you an idea of where you are in the plot, where you are in the story of the world, and where you are in the history of the world, and what played out before, and what kind of characters showed about, and where we're heading to next. And so it gives you an understanding. Yeah. And also quite fun. I find it quite fun to use this framework. And exactly, it's a framework. It's not literal. It's not like it has to be this thing and just the 12. There's so many different ways you can go about it, but it gives you at least some sort of ability to kind of comprehend and make better choices and judgments. And you can be wrong, and it's fine. You can kind of weave your way around that, but don't take it too seriously. But do you find because I guess my perspective on the world is that we are currently shifting archetypes, and they relate again to the constellations. So you mentioned this in your work as well, which we'll kind of maybe get into that too. But I kind of see, the bad king as the archetype for a long time throughout human history at the moment. And I think we're shifting towards maybe towards more of a matriarch, so maybe to the good queen. But I think also the shadow queen is out now too. I think after the shadow king, the shadow queen is here, and then we're kind of maybe going to head into the good king, or who knows? I don't know. We're going to head after that. But do you, I guess, extrapolate the archetypes and put them into a global consciousness as well?
I do also in my sort of more advanced courses, we look at this a little bit. Yeah. Because it is a reflection on where we are, and we also look at specifically also the topics that you've mentioned, sort of because it's current, it's a current narrative and conversation around the patriarchy. Now, the patriarchy, which is an archetype, or you could sort of looked at it from the version of the king, which is a patriarchy. There's nothing wrong as per se with the patriarchy. Because the patriarchy gives support in the light side. If it's used in the light side, it gives support to the whole family, to the tribe, nurturing, support, protection. That's what the patriarchy is about. And also challenging people to rise up, like the father archetype, the king archetype would always expect more, from their children and their tribe to become and better and improve. No, there's nothing wrong with that, but when it goes into the dark side or the shadow, which we've seen a lot, where it becomes the autocracy and the controlling. That's when it's losing its way, and that's what we have seen a lot. So I'm not personally against patriarchy. I'm happy if someone supports me and protects me.
Yeah.
So I'm happy about that. And then the same with the matriarchy. It's the same. It's the same thing. So now we're pivoting maybe more into this, but I can also see we're pivoting. I can see a lot of the shadow as well, because the matriarchy has a different way of controlling. It's just expressed differently, maybe more manipulative and kind of. It is also or it can be a control. And I think it's always about balancing those two. I also sometimes look at it from like energies, the masculine and the feminine. This is how our world is designed, and we want the balance and the collaboration of both. We don't want one or the other. Personally, I also would find it very boring if we only had women.
Yeah. So where do you see the hero archetype in all of this?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes. The hero is really us also. We are the hero of our own life. We are being confronted with challenges all the time. Someone might pass away, someone gets sick. We have all sorts of challenges that we master, and that's when the hero is being triggered, or we see someone suffering. The hero wants to go out and help the suffering. And that's, where the hero is triggered in our lives all the time. That's why we also relate to it so well. I mean, the hero is probably one of the most sort of portrayed archetypal figure in novels, in movies. It's always about the hero and the wondrous thing that the hero does to help others, and then come back and sort of transform also an area of their life or the tribe's life. So the hero can be seen anywhere, everywhere.
Why do you think that is? Do you think the hero do you think there is a hierarchy of archetypes to aim for? Because, each archetype is a different motivation, right? And so the question becomes, is there a certain motivation that's better than other motivations? And I think my theory is that if we take Jung's position of like motivations of different gods, and we have then we would have like a polytheistic sort of interpretation of the world. And then a monotheistic would be like, well, if there's all these different motivations, is there one motivation that's better than the rest? And then maybe that we answered that question and we said, yes, there is a motivation that's better than the rest. That is the hero archetype. And therefore we got monotheistic society, which is why we have Jesus, Buddha. We tend to see now like singular persons. And doesn't mean that it's a solo effort. It just means that the hero embodies and accepts all the different archetypes, and regardless of that, he or she still then acts in a way that is beneficial for everyone, which is, I guess, a greater understanding or a greater perspective and shift on the world. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's something that I think about quite often. And I don't know if you thought about the same thing in your work.
Well, I haven't really thought about it in this context, but I think it's a really good sort of thought pattern, and I think it is also, I can relate to that. It's almost, I haven't thought about the hero in this context, but I think that's a really good idea also. There is all the archetypes in their light side. It's always about bringing something to society that is of benefit in different aspects. The artist does it with creativity, something of benefit, and the pioneer does it to find some new land and build something positive for society. And you could probably look at it the way that the hero is the embodiment of all. And it is about serving others. And I think the hero so resonates with us because when we have overcome an obstacle, a challenge, not just an obstacle, a challenge, maybe, we have experienced health concerns and we kind of need to live with it and or integrate it into our life. Maybe it has changed our life completely. But once we sort of transform this aspect and integrate this into our life, which is the hero's journey, and then live with it, we have achieved a different level of consciousness and we have matured a step further. That's very empowering to us. And I think that is in essence what we're here for to do. That's my view of it. To grow and mature, but also to be in service of others. So not just selfishly grow, I just collect everything for myself. And the hero embodies that perfectly. So that's probably a really good way of looking at it. Kind of that is sort of, maybe if you boil all the motivation down to which is the positive motivation, it's around transformation for the better and being of service to others at the same time, not doing it selfishly.
Yeah, which is the lights that each archetype has in common.
Yeah, so that's right.
Which is why I think it's the union of all the archetypes and how we change from polytheistic to monotheistic. And I think that ancient societies kind of realize that, but they see the world in a very. I think ancient societies saw the world in a very archetypal lens. It was more about story and themes and linguistics, and now it's more about numbers and separation and distinct facts. Yeah. So I think that's what they were trying to explain in a very artistic way because they didn't have a logical way of explaining it, but now we're kind of catching up to that. So it's something that's been on my mind for a very, very long time. Yeah. And then that means the opposite side of the hero would be the villain. Yeah. And the villain is the shadow side. And that means the villain is the accumulation of all the dark aspects of put together into one. And I think that's why it's such a strong, we see this as a strong character in today's films. It's usually one. There is obviously like Avengers and stuff, but we tend to see like just a single hero movie with the villain. And there are different types of heroes and different types of villains. Oh, of course, I think that's it. It's our ultimate fight against or good versus evil.
Good versus evil fight.
Yeah. And do you believe in good versus evil?
I think this is how we go through our experiences. I mean, with my limited perception and my limited brain in this sort of body here, I think that's how I see it. So we're kind of in this finite bodies, and the way I experience something is because there is sort of a contrast. The table is here because it's contrasting against there's no table. Yeah. And I think this is the light and the shadow. For us to kind of, if I go out in life, let's say when I went through the transition period from corporate to becoming a coach, I went out there and I went to different networking events and different seminars to find what is it that I want to do. And then I came across, oh no, not that. Oh yes, that. So it's the sort of the discrepancy. Or the difference, and this is how we then can decide, oh no, I want to do this, because we experience the difference, and that's how we can then make experience, no, I want to go this path. And I think with the light and the dark it's similar, or that's the ultimate sort of story, and it becomes very philosophical in such a way. I can see that quite clearly. Where I personally have my challenges is because I see some of the dark sides in this world are so dark that I personally think, well, does it have to be so dark? Do we have to lose us or lose our soul in such a way? But maybe that's what it is about. Some people, they appear to me as if they have lost their soul, the human soul, and it can become so dark. And maybe that's the danger, that you can wander off into that dark side too far, and then you kind of don't find your way back.
Yeah, that is the hardest sort of path, and that is the wrestle between the two. And the question is, well, does it have to be that dark? And then the question becomes, does that equal a greater light or a greater hero? And does that mean that there's actually more meaning for you to step up? And it's something, like, because it's so dark, and more's being called of you right now. And I think that's the time we're in. Somewhat. I think it's called the Kali Yuga. So there's the dark ages, and so it gets really dark, and so now we need to like bring back the light in some sense. And then I don't know, maybe I think it's just a natural pattern. I think we go light to dark, on and off. We switch like a light switch sort of thing, and eventually we'll go back to the light. And there's this there's a interesting fact that like our sun is rotating another sun. It's dancing with another sun.
Oh, right, yes.
And so how you get the dark ages is when the two suns are furthest apart, and when the two suns are closer, there's literally more light, and so there's more consciousness. And so it's kind of like this natural pattern, natural dance. And so you either become aware of it or you don't become aware of it, but either way, but becoming aware of it means you just enjoy the dance because, you're dancing. Or if you're unaware of it or unconscious, you think it's quite literal. You think it's the end of the world. You think it's going to be the end of all life. But then once you become aware of like, oh no, it just starts again. And it's a bit chaotic. That's why insanity is a funny thing, because it's like you realize that it just keeps going on and on. It's kind of like reincarnation. And when you have the understanding that, okay, we reincarnate, we continue on, then you can let go of the seriousness of it all, because the shadow or the villain is comedic. But they take it quite seriously, and they're quite hurt. They take their pain very seriously, but then they laugh about it as an antidote to that as well, but in the wrong sort of way. And so you use the zodiac sign as well for this. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not an astrologer or anything. It's just, I can relate to that these big celestial bodies, they have certain energies, and that there is an influence onto us. And
I love the same thing.
I can also relate to it from a sort of physics perspective. There is an influence on us because they have just a huge energy.
So you're saying that there actually is like measurable influences from the relationship from, I guess, where Earth is in relation to another planet, or where it is in the constellation?
I mean, you can measure the energy or the magnetic field of any body. You can measure it of planet Earth as well as of other celestial bodies. So from that perspective, there is something there, and there is an interaction. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in this constellation. They kind of have to somehow keep in place. And I think there's some also maybe scientific evidence, don't quote me on that, how scientific it is, that the moon has influence on us. When we have full moon, there's a lot more crime rates and stuff, and that's a statistic. So I'm not an astrologer. I can relate to it, but I've studied the 12 houses of the zodiac as part for my sort of archetypal concepts, that these 12 archetypes then sort of have a dominance in one of these 12 houses, which kind of just puts another context into these archetypes. And again, it's not like completely this archetype only lives in this house. No, they are everywhere, but there's a dominance, and it's a way of looking at life and giving you a template to gain more information. How an archetype kind of expresses in a certain sort of situation.
And from, I guess, all your research into different aspects of coaching, is there one that resonates with you the most, or one that you find is the most helpful, or one you're most passionate about within all of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes I'd like to take the easy way out. No, there isn't, but there is one. I think it's the sort of how can I say, closest and most pristine way to our own transformation and understanding who we are goes below what's behavior. We have certain behaviors, maybe, assertiveness, lack of assertiveness, not being too controlling, is a behavior. People come to me and they say, I'm not confident in speaking up. I'm not confident in asking for a pay rise. These are sort of behaviors that we can see. But under these behaviors are drivers. And these drivers are our, aspects of being, which is, authenticity, awareness, vulnerability, courage. These are not concepts that are invented, not that there's anything wrong with that. We've invented many things, but they have a meaning that is understood by anyone, similar to archetypes. Like, it doesn't matter which country I am, if I talk about authenticity, people would relate to it in a certain way, which is quite commonly understood. Or courage. Courage is a way of being, an essence of us that is also portrayed in movies and novels, and everyone understands kind of what it is. So by really understanding it's like sort of looking at a car from the outside. You don't really have an understanding how it works. And then you kind of open the bonnet and someone explained to you, these are pistons, these are the cylinders, or whatever. I'm not a car mechanic. And this is how it works. And this is how our sort of aspects of being operate. And they run the show. They drive our decisions, our behavior, our results. And I find personally understanding where you are with, vulnerability. Do you have the guard up? Why do you have the guard up? Or can you be vulnerable and saying, okay, and tell your team, okay, I could have done that a little bit better. And it helps also to connect with other people. If you, for example, can be vulnerable in a healthy way, not too vulnerable and break out in tears, that's also unhealthy. I mean, understanding sort of these aspects of being that are deeper human qualities that are unique or everyone has. That I think is, for me, is this is
what
also
aspects are they? Or what qualities?
These are, what's your relationship with authenticity? What's your relationship with vulnerability or relationship with courage, love, self-expression? And there is a balance. There's a healthy relationship. Like if, for example, and they also interact. It's like, vulnerability and authenticity and awareness are very closely connected. The more aware I am who I am and how I impact others and how others impact me, the more authentic I can be and be myself. And also a vulnerability plays a big role because sometimes we have our guard up too much, and this can come from childhood upbringing, certain experiences we had, and then the guard goes up. But if my guard is up, which I often see in people, it's a protection mechanism. My authentic me cannot express itself because I have my guard up. It's not up just for my input, it's also up for output. And understanding these deeper qualities of yourself and becoming this authentic, aware person, that's where transformation is. And I think that's, for me, sort of the core of my coaching, and other things kind of branch off of it or different tools to use.
So, a bit of a deep question. What's your relationship to authenticity within yourself? Is that like asking these questions, being coach obviously requires that, like introspection too. And so what do you think your relationship is to that? And then why do you think, through exploring that, right, you get answers, I'd say. Like, what do you think the answer is, again, to why people struggle with authenticity? So how have you navigated that in yourself?
That is a very good question. So authenticity often is generally understood as I'm the word, I say this, and then I'm being that, and that's sort of in alignment, and that's part of authenticity. That's part of it. Another part of authenticity is what is, how congruent am I with reality? If I pretend to be a certain persona that I'm not, let's say I pretend I'm confident, but really underneath I'm not confident, I have a sort of unhealthy relationship to presenting my authentic self, because I'm doing this, look at me, I can do all these things, but really I'm not that confident, which means my relationship to reality, who I am, is skewed up. It's not healthy. So to restore that, you would want to look, okay, so I'm putting this pretense up, which is not authentically me. What's underlying this, cover up, and then you can, from a coaching perspective, you look at it. Where is this coming from? There are release methods, or you change. If you ultimately change your perception, you change the meaning of what has happened in the past. This is really where the transformation is. You cannot change the past, but you can change the meaning. And maybe you had an experience where the teacher said something to you, or you kind of were presenting something and you had, sort of a hiccup and the whole class laughed at you. That could have triggered, okay, I'm never doing this again. I'm just pretending I'm confident, but no, I'm not going there again. So once that particular incident, for example, is being understood, emotionally released, and you can see safely, okay, that happened back then, but really that's not me, then you can relate to yourself as being more authentic. You can sort of project it to the outside world, and people get it. Authenticity is felt. People feel it and they sense it if someone is not authentic. They may not know why or what exactly, but you feel it. And the thing is, for example, if I then talk to leaders, if you're not authentic in an interview, the interviewer will notice. So it minimizes your effectiveness. The interviewer will notice, well, there's something not adding up here. And they might ask more questions. They may never really find out why, but there is something where they think, no, I don't think I can hire this person. They're not really honest with me, or they're hiding something.
So do you think there's a relationship between the ability to be authentic and having a great life? Like that includes being respected, having fun, being playful, being invited out to things, getting a promotion, like all these things that you probably desire in life. And so the ability to become more authentic within yourself would probably express itself as a more beautiful life.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. 100%. Yeah, you've just nailed it, and that's what everyone wants. Everyone wants to be their authentic self, and there are different knobs, like very different aspects of being that may need to be looked at to become more authentic. Yeah. It could be around self-expression. I had one of my clients, for example, was sort of quite an outgoing person. She was doing, podcast, emceeing, being on the stage, even a little bit of stand-up comedy. And in her case, she was very self-expressed. She had no issues going on stage. Her communication was great, but she wasn't very authentic. Also, lovely, lovely person. There's nothing to do with it. She didn't come across as authentic. And what we found out is the reason she wasn't really authentic is because she wasn't really vulnerable. And especially if you are going on stage or so, you have to be also vulnerable. And she had the guard up. As we started to look at why that is, and to lower the guard, bring the vulnerability in a more healthy space, she could express herself authentically. And because she was so easy on stage and self-expressed, communication, she was wonderful. And that's kind of how it works. So basically that not being able to express yourself authentically had stifled her success, even though she was capable of it. and had, everything from a talent aspect, you would say, or self-expression. She had all of that, but she wasn't authentic.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest problems in today's society. And not that we don't want to be authentic. It's that I think this is where the story comes into play in the archetypes. It's because we had a bad king as the archetype ruler for quite a while, that then meaning that, control and being conformity, and it's like the shadow aspect of the king. It then made you very afraid to be yourself, which means like, I find a lot of like with my time coaching, a lot of people couldn't be themselves at home, or they, if they're playful, you get, you're told, no, don't do that at school. Like there's a lot of like no's, shoulds, do this, do that, especially in Western culture. And so that kind of stifles our self-expression. So we're fearful around sharing that, because I was trying to think of why would people not want to have a more beautiful life, right?
Yeah.
If that's what it equals. And it's because I think the message we've been told is that your self-expression and being yourself is actually causing harm. And so people are trying to be good by not expressing themselves.
Absolutely.
So the motivation behind the lack of self-expression is still coming from a good place. It's just not true, though. I think we just have to realize and understand that what we've been taught and what the message we've been told through the last 100 years, or at least my generation, my life, is not true. And I don't know how people come to realize that. How would you, how do you have that realization within yourself? Because one way to, intellectualize things, and I think that's also one of my struggles, is like I can conceptually understand the point. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. But then how do I actually embody that? Like, because like you said, it's kind of like imprinted, it's deeper, it's like it's stuck in there. So obviously you do that with your coaching as well. So how do you find that? How do you bring light to this sort of like narrative?
Yeah. I mean, that's very well observed. I mean, we can be very stifled in society, fulfilling all these norms, and then authenticity just goes down the gurgler. And also realizing this and learning to speak up. This is where the empowerment comes in. It does take courage to then speak up or change that. And that's also part of our sort of experience here, to then learn empowerment through that. And it can be very scary. And then sort of the aspects of how do I transform that? That is, first you need to identify it. You need to have the awareness. Oh, right, I am being that. And there was maybe a certain incident that happened at a certain stage, or I was primed like this through my culture and my upbringing. So the first step is raising the awareness around it and understand, okay, actually knowing, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is suppressing authenticity. And then it depends on the type of sort of experience that's there. If it is a more deeply traumatic experience, you need to connect through the emotion and kind of release the emotion. This is where NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, comes in, where you connect to the emotion of it, and you need to really meet it and let it go. It sounds very easy. It is actually usually a process of 30 minutes. And you can release that, and you sort of gain more freedom around this, and realized, okay, I don't have to behave like this anymore, and you can kind of restore a more healthy relationship to your self-expression. And it's not always necessary. It is also mostly everything around this transformation is a change in perception. If you change your perception around it and then learn how to integrate this into your life, this is how you transform yourself. This sort of emotional release is also, it's a part of it. But, someone can be, let's say they can be very restrained through an accident. and maybe their life will never will always be impacted by the results of this accident. So they need to learn to live with this, and they actually have to learn to change their perception around this to be able to make the most of it and live a happy and effective life. It's not enough to just logically say, oh, okay, I've been through this and now I'm just being differently. It doesn't work like this. It's a little bit of a deeper process required to look at it. But we have the capabilities as human beings. We can change our perception. We can change our way of being. And we can move towards this healthy balance of who we are and how we express ourselves. And that's, I think, what life is about. But is it always easy? No. Sometimes it's extremely challenging.
And that's why I think like we are moving to a matriarch, because I think that's somewhat the antidote. Like if you think about like what we need to be able to express ourselves is the, you know, the motherly sort of character where it's like the ability to be who you are, to express yourself without judgment, to play, to try on different hats. And I think, you know, like I guess in today's society as well, like a lot of us are trying to find self-expression, and because it's such a, I guess, a foreign thing for a lot of us, it's like we do try on different hats and maybe we are faking it for a little bit, but that's how you start. Like it's, you don't just authentically yourself. Like you need to go and try different things, find out what you like, find out what feels right. Like, you know, does podcasting feel right to me? Am I lying when I'm podcasting? Am I trying to be someone else? Like there's questions you need to ask yourself when you're trying new activities, and to be open and vulnerable about it, like actually with yourself, and be like, okay, actually it is something. But I think like what society could do is actually encourage that. Be like, oh, you know, great for you for trying things, and you know, it's okay to be different, and it's okay to express yourself in different ways. And I do see that happening in today's society as well, with like obviously with like podcasting, obviously with YouTube, and people becoming like influencers and people doing all this stuff. It is self-expression. But they also might not be their authentic selves. But it's okay, because society needs to explore this as a collective so that we find our authentic voice. That's together. Right. And just like it's that. So what we need is actually to encourage that more, because if we silence that voice, then we're going back to the bad king. And which is what we're kind of used to. And so we're kind of projecting our own experiences as a kid onto others now. Or our experiences in life onto others. And so it doesn't mean that it's not right or people are wrong. It's just we're just trying to navigate our way right now. So we need that nurture and that care sort of thing to freely do so. And I think that's what's happening, you know, with all this other political sort of stuff right now. But we won't go too deep into that. So that's
we'll leave that for another
time. But so if you have your own newsletter, you have a lot of courses and stuff as well, so people can kind of reach out and find your work. Do you want to talk more about your newsletter and your courses and tell people a bit more where they can find your work, and so they can maybe, you know, because I would love to encourage more people to do this work, to get in touch with their archetypes, to discover who they are on a deeper level, so that they can make a positive change to their life and to otherwise embody the hero archetype. It's really what this podcast is about. I call it human spirit, but I think for me, the human spirit is that hero that striving for the light. Like no matter what happens to you in life, no matter what goes on, you've got to keep striving towards the light sort of thing, and not let the shadow take over. That's right. Because it just doesn't do any good, and we could end up in a very bad place. And so I think that's what unites us all, is that human spirit, which is again the hero archetype. So you really have a good handle on archetypes. I love archetypes. I think I got into Carl Jung when I was quite young, and I was just obsessed with movies and writing and storytelling and stuff, and it started to make sense. Like, okay, look, I've seen this character before. Like, you know, they're the same character. Like, you know, Spyro was a massive inspiration as a kid. It's this purple dragon, but you know, he's the hero. And
that's right.
And then Simba the lion, he's the hero. I'm like, and then I'm like, oh well, you know, I want to be like that. So you start to notice when you're acting like that character, and I guess I was pretty judgmental as a kid on myself, and probably still today. Like I'll question, like to the point where like I have a grasp of the hero archetype, and so I try to embody that. But then I wonder, is that actually me being authentic to myself, or have I just caught onto an idea and now I'm trying to be that idea.
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting thing. Like,
oh yeah, we could. I mean, well, the good thing is, it can just be an idea, and as long as you're aware of it, it's also okay. And
Yeah.
you can embody different personalities. It can be authentic. Like, I'm right now in my podcasting. Personality. When I go home, I change into my track pants, and I'm in my at home personality.
Yeah.
All of them are authentic.
Yeah.
All of them are parts of me. And sometimes the idea can take over, and then you're not authentic.
Well, that's the thing. It becomes like you need, because the different archetypes, they're also different characters, right?
Yeah.
So you're playing a different role, and so I think like Jim Carrey spoke about it. Like depression is like because you're wearing a certain character for such a long time that it becomes quite heavy, and you forgot that you forgot that you were the spirits behind the character. You're not the character. Like,
that's amazing.
And so he's very into this. And I'm like, no, he's not crazy. He's telling the truth.
Yeah.
That guy. He is really telling the truth. Like he understands. That he isn't Jim Carrey, because if you look at his life, like he played The Mask, he played The Truman Show. He's done a lot of. He's had to kind of wrestle with this idea of like authenticity and his true self. If anyone has, it's really Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
And so I think he's come out the other end with this beautiful philosophy that he is like the spirit, and he's not depressed. He is like just very light, and he's like going with the flow, and he's putting on different hats. And Jim Carrey was just another character that he wore, and he wore it too seriously. And I think that's what the villain does. He gets so caught up in the role of it that he forgets that it's kind of a play, and everything in the day is play, because you can play different characters. The point of it all is to try on different things,
and that's also authentic.
And that is what the authentic human is.
Yeah.
That's what who we are. Is like it is that creative spirit. Like, that's what I think God is. It's like that source that created everything, the infinite. Why would you do that? Because you're just exploring the infinite opportunities and stuff in life. And so at our core, we are the infinite curiosity that is just expanding out into everything. And so we forget that. And when we take on a role too seriously, it kind of weighs you down. And I think that's why it causes depression, depresses you into that. And,
Very well explained. That's...
just Jim Carrey.
But it's, I can relate to that very, very much. And then we get lost in it and forgotten about it. And then this takes over, the depression. And it gets heavier and heavier. And it's a real experience, but there's a way out.
Yeah.
Or can be a way out. Yeah.
That's why I think like ayahuasca, I know it's a trend now as well. But I think that's because that's what we need, because ayahuasca breaks the character that you're playing. It shows you that you're not that character that you're playing, that you're actually something quite more and deeper than that.
Yeah.
And people are starting to realize this, and this is where the shift in consciousness is happening. Which is a beautiful thing. And so I know it's a bit of a trend, but sometimes there's truth behind trends too.
There's definitely truth behind it, and I can clearly also see it, and it's it's been used for so many years, and also the Bible says the plants is our medicine. Food is medicine. Medicine. Wow, that's a whole.
It's a whole other thing. Yeah, we'll do another podcast, because there's so much to explore. I have a bunch of questions still, but I think archetype is a good theme.
Yeah.
This one. So, it's back to your work though. I think people should know about your work and where you go.
Thank you. Yeah, I do have a website. It's called nhedwana.com.au. And I have my courses published there as well, and you can connect with me through hello@nhedwana.com.au. You can also connect with me through the website. My book, The Free Spirit of Your Life Purpose, is available on Amazon. You can also order it through my website. If it is in Australia, if it's international, then please go to Amazon, so you can get a Kindle version and a hard, a soft copy, soft cover. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on YouTube under my name and my business name, and on Instagram. And I have just started a podcast, which is called Spilling the Beans on Being a Leader, with my buddy from the coaching academy a few years ago. He lives in Brisbane. His name is John Williams. So we are sharing general information about how to become a confident and effective leader, because we've been in the corporate for many years, and we like to share the information. It's a bit humorous as well. It's not too serious. And we've just started it. And yes, I also have a newsletter. So if you subscribe to my website, you can get the newsletter as well. And that's me.
Amazing. Maybe I would love to maybe pass on a message to the audience, if you have one. It's from something that you felt like was important to share, or something that they would like to hear, or something you'd like to pass on to anyone listening.
To the message. Right, that's always a good one. My message is, do not forget how powerful you are. We are very powerful beings, and we're just scratching the surface to understand how powerful we are. And with my coaching, I also understand that I only scratch the surface on how powerful I am. So we are very powerful beings, and I want to bring that memory back into the world. We don't have to suffer that much. We don't have to be victims to so many things. We are quite powerful. Yeah.
Beautiful message. Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning into today's episode, and I'll see you next time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess, for coming on.
Thanks. Wow, that was.
Hey everyone. Thanks for listening to today's episode and for tuning into my podcast. From the bottom of my heart, your support truly means the world to me. If you enjoyed today's episode, if it sparked a new idea, connected you to the world, or simply gave you a greater sense of happiness, I have a small favor to ask. It would absolutely make my day if you could share this podcast with someone you care about, whether it's a friend, a family member, or a colleague. Simply send them a quick text with a link to the episode. Introducing them into something that you enjoyed would really, really help me and help the show out. So once again, thank you for your continued support and for being part of this journey with me. Until next time, take care and keep spreading those good vibes. And I'll see you in the next episode.